The Great Council chamber felt wrong today. Ambassador Zektar shifted his weight on the floating platform that served as his seat. His 6 eyes kept drifting to the empty space where the human delegation used to sit. 3 months had passed, since Captain Jake Morrison and his team simply vanished from known space. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. The morning briefing had been delayed twice already. Chancellor Vexerin's crystalline body flickered with nervous energy as she tried to maintain order among the 73 species that made up the Galactic Council. The Vorthak, the Hegemony, the Telepathic Consortium, and dozens of other civilizations all spoke at once. Their voices created a chaos of sound that filled the massive dome. "Order!" Chancellor Vexerin's voice boomed through the translation. "Systems. We must address the economic reports immediately." Zektar remembered the last time he had seen Jake Morrison. The human captain had been arguing about trade regulations with the Hegemony representative. Morrison's face had been calm, but his voice carried that edge all humans seemed to have when they disagreed with something. He had called the regulations short-sighted and economically destructive. The council had voted against the human proposal anyway. They always did. The Budget Committee's chief analyst floated to the center of the chamber. Her tentacles moved in the formal patterns that indicated serious news. "The preliminary reports are complete," she announced. "The economic impact of human departure exceeds all projections." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Councillor Thane's breathing apparatus wheezed loudly as he leaned forward. "How bad can it be? They were less than 1% of our total population." The analysts' tentacles drooped. In the 3 months since their departure, galactic productivity has dropped by 18%. Trade volume is down 32%. Innovation patents have decreased by 67%. Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Zektar felt his stomach turn. He had always thought the humans were too aggressive, too quick to act without proper deliberation. Their ships moved too fast. Their decisions came too quickly. Their solutions seemed too simple for complex galactic problems. "There must be some mistake," said Ambassador Cleara from the Telepathic Consortium. Her mental voice touched every mind in the chamber with waves of disbelief. Such a small population cannot have such large effects. The analyst brought up holographic displays that filled the air above the council floor. Charts and graphs showed economic data from across the galaxy. Red warning indicators flashed on screen after screen. The data is accurate. Human trade routes carried 43% of all galactic commerce despite humans operating only 12% of registered vessels. Zektar stared at the numbers. He remembered questioning Captain Morrison about human shipping methods during a trade committee meeting 6 months ago. Morrison had explained something he called efficiency, optimization, but Zektar had dismissed it as human recklessness. Now he wished he had listened more carefully. Their mining operations were 27 times more productive than the galactic average, the analyst continued. Human agricultural colonies fed populations 3 times larger than similar non-human settlements. Their manufacturing centers produced goods at costs 40% below standard galactic rates. Chancellor Vexerin's crystalline form pulsed with what Zektar recognized as confusion. "How is this possible? Our industrial specialists reviewed human methods many times. They found nothing revolutionary." Ambassador Cleara's mental voice carried a note of realization. "Perhaps we were looking for the wrong things. We expected advanced technology, complex procedures. Instead, humans used simple methods in ways we never considered." The Defense Committee representative stepped forward. His armored shell gleamed under the chamber lights. "The military implications are equally concerning. Human security contractors handled peacekeeping operations on 47 worlds. They maintained stability in regions where our own forces failed repeatedly." Zektar remembered the Kethran border crisis 2 years ago. 3 council fleets had been unable to stop the fighting between colonial settlements. Captain Morrison had arrived with a single ship and 12 security officers. The fighting stopped within a week. When asked how he did it, Morrison had simply said he talked to everyone involved. The council had assumed he meant formal negotiations. Now Zektar wondered if they had missed something important. What about their research contributions? Asked Dr. Yelthara from the Science Division. Surely those can be quantified. The analyst's tentacles moved to new displays. Human scientists published 14% of all research papers in the past 5 years. Their work is cited in 61% of current ongoing projects. Medical advances from human researchers have improved life expectancy across 17 species. The numbers kept getting worse, or better, depending on how you looked at them. Zektar realized the council had never properly measured human contributions, because they had always assumed those contributions were minor. Humans were newcomers to galactic civilization. They had only joined the council 47 years ago. Most species had been part of the galaxy for thousands of years. We need to understand what we lost, Chancellor Vexrin said finally. Form emergency committees to analyze human methods in all sectors. Find out how they achieved these results. Counselor. Thane's breathing grew more labored. What if we cannot replicate their methods? What if something about human nature made their approaches impossible for other species to copy? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zektar had always believed that intelligence was intelligence. Methods that worked for one species should work for any species, but humans had always been different. They made decisions faster than seemed wise. They took risks that appeared foolish. They found solutions in places no one else thought to look. We must try, Chancellor Vexrin said. The alternative is economic collapse across multiple sectors. The first emergency appropriation was approved within an hour, 50 billion credits to fund immediate research into human industrial methods. Another 30 billion for trade route optimization studies, 20 billion more for agricultural analysis programs. As the council session ended, Zektar remained in his seat looking at the empty human delegation area. A small data pad sat on Captain Morrison's former desk. Someone had left it there when the humans departed. No one had moved it. No one wanted to admit the humans were really gone. The pad displayed a simple message in human script. Zektar had learned to read basic English during his years working with human delegations. The message said, "Problems are opportunities wearing work clothes. Thanks for everything. Jake." Zektar finally understood. The humans had not left because they were angry. They had not left because of any specific disagreement. They had left because they saw an opportunity somewhere else, somewhere beyond the council's careful rules and slow deliberations, somewhere they could build something new instead of fixing something old. The council chamber felt empty now in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. The humans had taken something with them when they left, something the council was only beginning to understand they needed. Dr. Rixel stared at the stack of data tablets covering his laboratory table. Each tablet contained research notes left behind by Dr. Lisa Chang, the human xenobiologist who had worked alongside him for 8 years. She had vanished with the rest of her species 3 months ago, leaving behind the most comprehensive study of galactic civilization ever compiled. The insectoid scientist's compound eyes scanned through pages of handwritten notes. Lisa had always preferred writing by hand, claiming it helped her think better. Rixel had thought this was another strange human quirk. Now he realized she had been documenting insights that no other species had ever noticed. Creative stubbornness? Rixel read aloud, his mandibles clicking as he formed the unfamiliar English words. Lisa had written extensively about this concept. According to her notes, humans possessed an unusual trait that made them refuse to accept impossible situations. Where other species would calculate odds and give up when success seemed unlikely, humans would simply try harder. The laboratory door chimed and Chancellor Vexrin entered with 3 other council members. Her crystalline form cast rainbow patterns on the white walls as she moved toward Rixel's workstation. "Doctor, we need to understand what we lost," she said without preamble. "The Economic Committee projects complete collapse in 6 key sectors. Within 2 years, if we cannot replicate human capabilities." Rixel gestured toward the data tablets with one of his 4 arms. "Dr. Chang documented everything, but her conclusions challenge our basic understanding of intelligence and problem-solving." Counselor Thane wheezed closer, his breathing apparatus struggling with the laboratory's atmosphere. "Show us what you have found." Rixel activated the main display screen and pulled up Lisa's comparative analysis charts. She studied problem-solving, approaches across 47 species over 6 years. Look at these results. The screen showed data from thousands of engineering challenges, diplomatic negotiations, and crisis situations. In every category, humans scored far above galactic averages, despite having smaller brains than most species and less advanced technology than the major civilizations. "Impossible," muttered Ambassador Cleara. Her telepathic abilities let her sense Rixel's emotional state, and she could feel his confusion and growing concern. Their cranial capacity is average. Their processing speed is unremarkable. How do they achieve superior results? Rixel clicked his mandibles nervously and scrolled to Lisa's psychological analysis section. Dr. Chang identified 3 key differences in human cognition. First, they process failure differently than any known species. When we encounter setbacks, we recalculate and often conclude that success is impossible. Humans treat failures as learning experiences that bring them closer to solutions. The display showed brain scan comparisons between humans and other species. During problem-solving exercises, human neural activity patterns looked chaotic compared to the organized thought processes of more advanced civilizations. Second, Rixel continued, humans excel at pattern recognition across unrelated domains. They see connections between completely different fields of knowledge. Dr. Chang called this lateral thinking. They solve engineering problems using biological principles, resolve diplomatic disputes with mathematical concepts, and approach military strategy like artistic composition. Chancellor Vexrin's form pulsed with interest. "Can you give us specific examples?" Rixel pulled up a case study from the Kepler mining incident. When the Kepler asteroid mining operation faced catastrophic equipment failures, 12 different species spent 4 months analyzing the technical problems. Human engineer Danny Brooks solved it in 3 days by applying principles from ant colony behavior. He had studied insect societies as a hobby. The council members exchanged glances. This explanation made no logical sense according to standard intelligence theory, yet the results were undeniable. "The third difference is most significant," Rixel said, scrolling to Lisa's final conclusions. "Humans have extremely high tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. Most species require clear parameters and defined outcomes before beginning complex projects. Humans start working on problems even when they don't understand the full scope of what they're trying to solve." Ambassador Cleara's mental voice carried notes of disbelief. "That sounds like recklessness, not intelligence." Rixel activated a video recording of Lisa explaining her research to a conference of galactic scientists 2 years ago. Her image appeared on the screen, tall and confident with short brown hair and bright green eyes that seemed to look directly at the viewers. "The key insight," Lisa's recorded voice explained, "is that humans don't wait for perfect information before taking action. We start with incomplete data and adjust our approach as we learn more. This gives us enormous advantages in rapidly changing situations where traditional analysis methods become obsolete before they can be completed." The recording showed Lisa presenting data about human terraforming projects. Human colonies succeeded in environments where other species failed, not because they had better technology, but because they constantly adapted their methods based on new discoveries. Captain Ryan Torres and his terraforming team exemplify this approach, Lisa's recording continued. They established successful colonies on worlds that our computer models rated as uninhabitable. They succeeded by treating each challenge as a puzzle to solve, rather than an obstacle to overcome. Counselor Thane's breathing became more labored as he processed the implications. Are you saying that human irrationality was actually a form of superior rationality? Rixel paused the recording and turned to face the council members. Dr. Chang's conclusion was that humans think in ways that appear chaotic but actually represent a more advanced form of intelligence. They process complexity better than species with more organized thought patterns. The laboratory fell silent, except for the humming of equipment and Thane's wheezing respirator. Chancellor Vexeren's crystalline form dimmed as she absorbed the information. "Show us the military analysis," she said finally. Rixel scrolled to Lisa's section on human conflict resolution. This is perhaps the most remarkable finding. Humans resolved 87% of conflicts they mediated, compared to 34% for traditional council methods. They achieved this by what Dr. Chang termed empathetic strategy. The display showed recordings of human mediator Kate Sullivan working with hostile alien factions. Instead of following standard diplomatic protocols, she spent time understanding the emotional and cultural factors driving each conflict. Her solutions often surprised everyone involved because they addressed needs that traditional negotiators never recognized. She found solutions that made everyone feel like winners, Rixel explained. Other species approach negotiations as zero-sum games, where one side must lose for the other to win. Humans consistently found ways to expand the total benefits available to all parties. Ambassador Cleara's mental presence grew stronger as she focused her telepathic abilities on the data. The implications are staggering. We have been measuring intelligence using the wrong criteria for millennia. Chancellor Vexeren activated her personal communicator. Emergency session in 2 hours. All department heads must attend. We need to completely restructure our approach to every major galactic problem. As the council members left the laboratory, Rixel remained alone with Lisa's research. He picked up one of her handwritten notebooks and read her final entry, dated the day before humanity's departure. The council sees our methods as primitive because they don't understand that complexity requires simplicity. We solve hard problems by breaking them into small pieces and trying lots of different approaches until something works. They try to solve hard problems by thinking harder about them. Thinking has its place, but doing gets results. Rixel closed the notebook and looked around the empty laboratory. For the first time in his long scientific career, he wondered if his species had been thinking about intelligence completely wrong. The humans had not left because they were frustrated with galactic civilization. They had left because they had outgrown it. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to lose its most effective problem solvers. Trade Minister Yel Noth stared at the empty docking bay where Captain Amy Rodriguez used to park her cargo ship. The massive space station felt hollow without the constant stream of human vessels that had once filled every available berth. 6 months had passed since the humans vanished, and the Galactic Trade Consortium was falling apart. The emergency meeting had drawn representatives from every major trade guild in known space. Hundreds of species gathered in the conference center, their voices creating a symphony of concern and confusion. Yelnoth's tentacles moved in agitated patterns as he reviewed the latest economic reports. "The numbers don't lie," announced Chief Analyst Mordek, his scaled hide reflecting the harsh meeting room lights. "Galactic trade volume has dropped 67% since human departure. Transaction costs have tripled. Delivery times have doubled." A rumble of discontent passed through the assembled traders. Representative Kexelar of the Outer Rim Merchants raised his voice above the noise. "How is this possible? Humans operated maybe 15% of registered trade vessels." Yelnoth activated the main display, showing trade route maps from before and after human departure. The difference was startling. Where complex networks of interconnected paths had once existed, now only simple point-to-point routes remained. "Captain, Rodriguez and her colleagues didn't just move cargo," Yelnoth explained. They revolutionized how we think about commerce itself. Look at these efficiency comparisons. The screen showed data that made seasoned traders gasp in disbelief. Human cargo ships carried 3 times more goods per cubic meter than standard vessels. Their delivery schedules achieved 96% accuracy compared to the Galactic average of 62%. Most shocking of all, human trade operations generated 40% fewer disputes than traditional methods. Impossible, muttered Captain Zorthak of the Heavy Freight Guild. We've analyzed their ship designs countless times. Nothing special about their cargo holds or engines. Yelnoth scrolled through detailed reports compiled by trade analysts over the past months. The breakthrough wasn't in their technology. It was in their approach to business relationships. The display showed recordings of Amy Rodriguez negotiating with suppliers on Kepler Station. Instead of the formal contracts and detailed legal frameworks favored by most species, she conducted business through what humans called handshake deals. Her word was considered more reliable than most written agreements. She built trust through consistency, Yelnoth continued. Human traders developed something they called relationship capital. They invested time in understanding their partners' needs and finding ways to help everyone succeed. The concept seemed alien to most species present. Traditional galactic commerce operated on strict contractual obligations enforced through legal systems. Trust was considered a luxury that wise traders could not afford. Representative Kexlar leaned forward in his mobility chair. You're telling us that humans succeeded in business by being nice to their customers? Yelnoth brought up case studies from human trade operations. More than nice. They were strategic about building long-term partnerships. Captain Rodriguez once spent 3 weeks helping a Vorthak mining company solve production problems that had nothing to do with her cargo contracts. The mining company became her exclusive shipping partner for 17 years. The room buzzed with confused chatter. This approach violated basic principles taught in every galactic business school. Successful traders were supposed to maximize short-term profits and minimize unnecessary expenses. Show them the Tantalus incident, suggested Chief Analyst Mordek. Yelnoth nodded and pulled up records from the notorious trade dispute that had nearly triggered an interspecies war 5 years ago. 2 major trading blocks had been locked in, a bitter conflict over shipping rights through the Tantalus system. Standard arbitration had failed repeatedly. Human mediator Captain Steve Mitchell resolved the dispute in 6 days, Yelnoth explained. His solution was considered impossible by traditional negotiation theory. The screen showed Mitchell's proposal. Instead of dividing shipping rights between the competing factions, he had suggested a joint venture that expanded the total volume of trade through the system. Both sides ended up making more money than they would have under their original demands. Positive sum thinking, Yelnoth said, using the human term. They found ways to make the total benefits bigger instead of fighting over how to divide existing benefits. The implications were staggering. Representative Kexlar's voice carried a note of desperation. Can we replicate their methods? Train our traders to think like humans? Chief Analyst Mordek's scales darkened with pessimism. We've tried. The consortium hired the best business consultants in the galaxy to study human trade practices. Every attempt to copy their methods has failed. The display showed results from 6 months of intensive training programs. Traditional traders could learn to mimic human negotiation techniques, but they couldn't replicate the intuitive understanding of relationship dynamics that made those techniques effective. The problem is fundamental, Mordek continued. Human traders genuinely cared about their partner's success. For most species, this caring appears to be performative rather than authentic. Business partners can sense the difference. Yelnoth remembered his own interactions with Amy Rodriguez. She had always asked about his family, remembered personal details from previous conversations, and offered help with problems that had nothing to do with their business arrangements. At the time, he had assumed this was elaborate social manipulation, designed to secure better deals. Now he realized she had simply been treating him like a friend. The trust networks are collapsing, announced Emergency Coordinator Veltara from her position near the main display. Without human traders to maintain relationship bridges between hostile species, old conflicts are resurging. The screen showed a map of current trade disruptions. Red zones marked areas where commerce had stopped completely due to renewed hostilities between trading partners. 3 separate trade wars had erupted in regions that had been peaceful for decades. The humans weren't just moving cargo, Veltara explained. They were maintaining diplomatic relationships that kept commerce flowing between species that didn't trust each other directly. The room fell silent as the full scope of the crisis became clear. Human traders had served as neutral intermediaries in countless business relationships across the galaxy. Without their stabilizing presence, centuries-old prejudices and conflicts were destroying the economic cooperation that galactic civilization depended on. Representative Kexlar's voice was barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" Yelnoth looked around the room at hundreds of worried faces representing dozens of species. "We adapt or we collapse. The consortium is authorizing emergency expenditures to develop new trade protocols based on human methods. The price tag was enormous. Trillions of credits would be needed to rebuild trust networks, retrain traders, and develop new conflict resolution systems. Even then, success was far from guaranteed. "Motion to approve emergency funding," called out Captain Zorthak. "Seconded," responded Representative Kexlar. The vote was unanimous, but Yelnoth could see doubt in every face. The galaxy was learning a painful lesson about the difference between having something and appreciating its value. Humans had left behind more than empty ships and abandoned trade routes. They had taken with them an entire philosophy of business, based on trust, cooperation, and mutual benefit. As the meeting ended, Yelnoth remained in the empty conference room, staring at the trade route maps on the main display. Somewhere beyond the rim of known space, human ships were probably establishing new trade networks based on principles the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The Council was about to pay the highest price in its history to learn what humanity had tried to teach them for free. Security Chief Mardoon stood in the command center of Outpost Sigma-7, watching screens that showed 17 different worlds under his protection. The irony was not lost on him that these same worlds were being defended by systems created by the humans who had abandoned galactic civilization 9 months ago. Captain Steve Mitchell had installed the defensive protocols 2 years before humanity's departure. At the time, the Council had questioned the need for such elaborate security measures in what they considered a peaceful sector. Now those same defensive systems were the only thing preventing complete chaos. Incoming transmission from Kepler. "Mining station," announced Lieutenant Kexara, her 4 arms working efficiently across multiple control panels. "They're reporting another pirate raid attempt." Mardoon moved to the tactical display, his armored exoskeleton clanking against the metal flooring. The screen showed 3 unidentified ships approaching the mining station's perimeter. As they crossed into the protected zone, automated warning systems activated exactly as Steve Mitchell had programmed them. "Unknown vessels. You are entering a protected area." The automated message broadcasted in 47 different languages. "Withdraw immediately or face defensive action." The pirate ships ignored the warning and continued their approach. Mardoon watched as the defensive network responded with precision that still amazed him after months of operation. Drone interceptors launched from hidden platforms, creating a barrier between the attackers and the mining station. "The human systems never fail," Lieutenant Kexara observed, as the pirates retreated rather than face overwhelming defensive fire. 9 months of continuous operation and not a single malfunction. Mardoon nodded grimly. Captain Mitchell's defensive networks protected more territory than the entire Council security force had been able to cover with traditional methods. The human approach to security had been fundamentally different from established galactic practices. "Pull up the Mitchell files again," Mardoon ordered. "I want to review his defense philosophy." The main screen displayed video recordings of Steve, Mitchell explaining his security concepts to skeptical council members. The human captain appeared confident and relaxed, despite facing an audience that clearly doubted his unconventional methods. Traditional defense focuses on building walls, Mitchell's recorded voice explained. Strong barriers that keep threats away from valuable targets. This approach works until someone finds a way through your walls. Then you lose everything at once. The recording showed Mitchell's alternative proposal. Instead of concentrated defensive positions, he had created layered networks that could adapt to changing threat patterns. His systems used artificial intelligence to learn from each attack and improve their responses. Distributed resilience, Mitchell had called it. No single point of failure. Every component can function independently, but they work better together, like human societies. At the time, Council military advisors had criticized the approach as overly complex and resource-intensive. Traditional defensive doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower concentrated at strategic choke points. Mitchell's network seemed scattered and inefficient by comparison. "Sir, we have another situation," Lieutenant Kexara announced. 3. Different systems are reporting simultaneous attacks on shipping lanes. Mardoon felt his primary heart skip a beat. Coordinated attacks across multiple systems had been impossible under human security protocols. The defensive networks had shared information instantly across vast distances, allowing rapid response to emerging threats. "Are the human systems responding?" he asked. Kexara's tentacles moved frantically across her control interfaces. "Yes, sir, but with reduced effectiveness. The networks appear to be operating in isolation mode." Mardoon cursed in his native language. This was the scenario that had kept him awake for months. The human defensive systems were designed to function independently, but their true strength came from coordinated operation across the entire network. "Can we restore network communication?" he asked. "Negative, sir. Captain Mitchell embedded communication. Protocols that we cannot access. The systems are protecting themselves from unauthorized modification." The screens around the command center showed the results. Individual defensive networks successfully repelled attacks on their assigned territories, but they could not coordinate responses to prevent the attackers from simply moving to less defended targets. Mardoon activated his personal communicator. "Emergency council session required. We have a critical security situation." While waiting for the council to convene, Mardoon reviewed Captain Mitchell's personnel files. The human security officer had served with distinction for 12 years, consistently achieving results that traditional military doctrine said were impossible. "Display the Frontier War analysis," Mardoon ordered. The main screen showed detailed reports from the conflict that had raged along the galactic rim before human intervention. 3 major military powers had been locked in a stalemate that was bleeding resources from dozens of worlds. Captain Mitchell had arrived with a single security vessel and a team of 24 human officers. Within 6 weeks, the fighting had stopped completely. His after-action report had been filed away and largely ignored by Council military historians. "He didn't defeat the combatants," Mardoon read aloud from Mitchell's report. "He convinced them that fighting was counterproductive to their actual goals." The recordings showed Mitchell meeting separately with each faction's leadership. Instead of negotiating traditional ceasefire agreements, he had helped them identify the underlying economic and social problems that had triggered the conflict. "Military action treats symptoms," Mitchell had written. "Lasting peace requires addressing root causes." His solutions had been elegant in their simplicity. Trade agreements that gave each faction economic incentives to cooperate, cultural exchange, programs that reduced mutual mistrust, joint infrastructure projects that created shared benefits. The human approach to security was preventive rather than reactive, Mardoon muttered to himself. They solved problems before they became conflicts. "Lieutenant," Kexara looked up from her control station. "Sir, the council session is ready." Mardoon connected to the emergency briefing channel. Chancellor Vexerin's crystalline form appeared on the main screen. along with representatives from 12 other worlds currently under attack. "Report, Security Chief," the Chancellor ordered. "The human defensive systems continue to protect assigned territories with excellent results," Mardoon began. "However, we are seeing coordinated attacks that exploit gaps in network coverage." The assembled council members exchanged worried glances. Ambassador Zektar spoke for many when he asked, "Can we expand the human systems to cover vulnerable areas?" Mardoon shook his head. "Captain Mitchell's defensive networks are self-contained and encrypted. We cannot modify them or create new installations using the same technology." "What about hiring other security contractors?" suggested Counselor. "Thane, we've tried," Mardoon replied. "No other species has been able to achieve comparable results. Human security methods require human thinking patterns." The silence stretched uncomfortably as council members absorbed the implications. The galaxy's most effective security systems were gradually becoming obsolete as threats evolved beyond their original parameters. "Recommendation?" Chancellor Vexrin asked. Mardoon looked around his command center at screens showing human defensive systems still faithfully protecting worlds whose inhabitants had never appreciated their value. "Emergency appropriation for security infrastructure. Redesign," he said finally. "We need to completely rebuild galactic defense based on principles learned from studying human methods. The cost would be staggering. Trillions of credits to develop new technologies, retrain personnel, and establish defensive networks across hundreds of worlds. Even then, success was far from guaranteed without the human intuition that had made the original systems so effective." "Motion approved," Chancellor Vexrin announced after a brief vote. "Begin immediate implementation." As the council session ended, Mardoon remained in his command center surrounded by displays showing human defensive systems still operating perfectly within their original parameters. Captain Mitchell had left behind guardian angels that protected the galaxy even after humanity had given up on galactic civilization. The humans had not abandoned their responsibilities when they left. They had simply stopped believing that the galaxy wanted to learn from them. Now the Council was paying unprecedented sums to discover what humanity had tried to teach them through daily example. Mardoon wondered if Steve Mitchell knew that his defensive systems were still protecting worlds that had never thanked him for his service. Chancellor Vexrin stood before the empty human delegation seats 1 year after humanity's departure. The Memorial Preservation Order had been her idea, though she wasn't sure why she felt compelled to keep the space exactly as Captain Jake Morrison and his team had left it. The small data pad still sat on Morrison's former desk, its simple message glowing softly in the dim chamber lighting. The final appropriation vote had been scheduled for today. The largest expenditure in galactic history would either save their civilization or bankrupt it completely. Either way, the galaxy would be forever changed by humanity's absence. "The emergency session will now come to order," Vexrin announced to the packed chamber. Representatives from all 73 member species had gathered for this historic moment, along with observers from dozens of non-aligned worlds. Economic Minister Kelta approached the central podium, his usual confidence replaced by obvious nervousness. The past year had tested every assumption about how galactic civilization functioned. The results were both humbling and terrifying. "The comprehensive analysis is complete," Kelta began. "Total economic impact of human departure now exceeds 4 trillion credits in direct losses. Projected long-term effects suggest civilizational regression to pre-industrial levels within 50 years if current trends continue." Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. Even the most pessimistic projections had not predicted such catastrophic consequences from losing less than 1% of the galactic population. "How is this possible?" demanded Ambassador Cleara, her telepathic abilities picking up waves of fear and confusion from minds throughout the chamber. Kelta activated the main display, showing interconnected charts that mapped humanity's role in galactic civilization. The visualization resembled a vast web with humans at countless critical junction points. We made a fundamental error in our analysis, Kelta explained. We measured human population percentages and assumed their importance was proportional to their numbers. We failed to recognize that they occupied strategic positions throughout our entire social and economic structure. The display zoomed in on specific examples. Human doctors had developed medical techniques that 17 different species now depended on for basic health care. Human engineers had designed infrastructure systems that supported billions of non-human citizens. Human diplomats had created peace treaties that prevented wars affecting hundreds of worlds. They were not just participants in our civilization, Kelta continued. They were the connective tissue that held it together. Chancellor Vexerin remembered her last conversation with Captain Morrison 6 weeks before humanity's departure. He had tried to explain something he called systems thinking, but she had dismissed it as another human overcomplication of complex galactic politics. The humans saw patterns that we missed, Kelta said, scrolling through examples of human innovations. Captain Alex Barnes developed economic theories that predicted market fluctuations with 94% accuracy. Traditional galactic economic models achieve 37% accuracy. The screen showed Barnes's research into what he called cascade effects in complex economic systems. His work had identified vulnerabilities in galactic trade networks that traditional economists had never noticed. Those same vulnerabilities were now causing the economic collapse they had predicted. Engineer Sam Watson's infrastructure designs are still functioning at 100% efficiency after minimal maintenance, Kelta continued. Comparable non-human installations require constant repairs and updates to maintain 70% efficiency. The implications were staggering. Human engineering had not just been more effective, it had been fundamentally different in its approach to long-term sustainability and adaptive design. Show them the diplomatic analysis, Chancellor Vexerin ordered. The display switched to maps showing current conflict zones across the galaxy. Red markers indicated active wars, orange showed rising tensions, and yellow marked areas of diplomatic concern. The visual was overwhelming in its scope. Before human departure, we had 3 active conflicts and 12 diplomatic disputes, Kelta explained. Currently, we have 27 active wars, 84 major disputes, and hundreds of minor conflicts. The human diplomatic philosophy had been based on what they called proactive engagement. Instead of waiting for problems to escalate into crises, human mediators had identified potential conflicts years in advance and worked to address underlying causes. Kate Sullivan's conflict prevention protocols are being studied by diplomatic academies on 43 worlds, Kelta said. Early implementation attempts show promising results, but we lack the cultural understanding necessary for full application. Chancellor Vexerin felt her crystalline form dim with the weight of accumulated revelations. Every sector of galactic civilization had depended on human contributions in ways that became visible only after those contributions vanished. What about the reconstruction proposal? Asked Counselor Thane, his breathing apparatus working harder than usual under stress. Kelta scrolled to the final section of his presentation. The Galactic Reconstruction Initiative represents our attempt to rebuild civilization using principles learned from studying human methods. The price tag appeared on the main screen, causing gasps of disbelief throughout the chamber. The emergency appropriation requested 12 trillion credits spread across 15 years. The amount represented nearly half of the galaxy's total economic output. The plan involves complete restructuring of educational systems to emphasize creative problem-solving over traditional memorization, economic reforms based on human concepts of mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. Diplomatic training, focused on preventive engagement rather than crisis management, Ambassador Zektar leaned forward in his floating platform. Can we be certain these changes will work without humans to guide implementation? Kelta's posture sagged slightly. There are no guarantees. We are essentially attempting to reverse engineer an entire philosophy of civilization based on observation of its effects. The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated the magnitude of what they were being asked to approve. 12 trillion credits to try to become more like the species they had spent decades trying to control and correct. The alternative is civilizational collapse, Chancellor Vexrin stated quietly. The choice is simple even if the solution is not. The vote was called without further debate. Representatives activated their voting devices across the chamber, each decision representing countless worlds and billions of citizens. The results appeared on the main display within minutes. Unanimous approval. Chancellor Vexrin stood and walked to Captain Morrison's memorial seat. She picked up the small data pad and read the message again. Problems are opportunities wearing work clothes. Thanks for everything. Jake. The appropriation is approved, she announced to the chamber. Implementation begins immediately. As representatives filed out of the chamber, Vexrin remained alone with the empty human seats. The galaxy had just committed to spending more money than had ever been spent on anything in recorded history. They were paying to learn lessons that humanity had tried to teach them for free. The humans had not left because they were angry or frustrated. They had left because they had found something better to do with their time than trying to fix a civilization that did not want to be fixed. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, they were probably building new societies based on principles the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The Council would pay whatever it cost to become worthy of humanity's return. Whether humans would ever care enough to notice remained an open question. The galaxy had learned the difference between earning respect and commanding it. The empty seats would remain as a reminder of the most expensive lesson in galactic history. True civilization could not be imposed or regulated. It had to be chosen every day by people who believed that tomorrow could be better than today. The humans had believed that. Now the galaxy would try to learn how.